The Middle East stands on the edge of a major conflict, its cities and people bracing for what could be a turning point in modern history. The air is thick with uncertainty, and the world's attention is fixed on a region that has long been a flashpoint for global tensions. On July 10, 2025, tension grips capitals from Washington to Tehran and Tel Aviv. In these power centers, leaders and citizens alike are glued to breaking news, aware that every decision made in the coming days could have far-reaching consequences. The sense of urgency is palpable, as governments weigh their next moves and ordinary people wonder what tomorrow will bring. Just weeks earlier, a joint US-Israeli strike on Iran's nuclear facilities in late June sent shockwaves through the region. The operation, carried out with precision and secrecy, targeted key sites deep within Iran's desert heartland. The aftermath left not only physical destruction but also a profound sense of vulnerability and anger across the Middle East. The world now faces the fallout of this bold move, with leaders scrambling to manage the crisis. Emergency meetings are held behind closed doors, as diplomats rush to contain the situation and prevent a wider war. The international community is on edge, with global markets reacting and humanitarian organizations preparing for the worst. The fragile Gaza ceasefire, just 60 days old, hangs by a thread, further complicated by the attacks on Iran. In Gaza, the streets are tense, and the people are wary, knowing that any escalation could shatter the hard-won peace. The region's many conflicts are now dangerously intertwined, each one threatening to ignite the others. US, Israeli, and Iranian leaders are making high-stakes decisions that could either restore calm or ignite war. In war rooms and government offices, strategists debate the risks and rewards of every possible action. The fate of millions hangs in the balance as leaders weigh diplomacy against the threat of further violence. At the heart of the crisis lies deep mistrust and clashing interests over Iran's nuclear ambitions. For years, Iran has insisted its program is peaceful, while the US and Israel remain convinced it poses a grave threat. The lack of trust has fueled a cycle of suspicion, covert operations, and now open conflict. The US and Israel see Iran's program as an existential threat. Iran sees the strikes as proof the West wants regime change. On the streets of Tehran, anger boils over, while in Israel, security is tightened and citizens brace for possible retaliation. The rhetoric on all sides grows sharper, making compromise seem ever more distant. As Netanyahu meets Trump in Washington, the world watches. Will they unite or divide, and what will Iran do next? The outcome of their talks could set the course for the entire region, determining whether diplomacy can prevail or if the spiral toward war will continue unchecked. The region's stability now depends on the choices of a few powerful leaders. Their decisions in the coming days will shape not only the fate of the Middle East, but also the future of global security. As the world holds its breath, the stakes could not be higher. The US and Israel's direct strikes on Iran marked a dramatic escalation. Between June 13 and 25, they targeted Iran's key nuclear sites, Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan, using bunker-busting bombs. The goal: cripple Iran's nuclear capabilities and send a message of strength. The attacks delayed Iran's program by at least 2 years, but didn't eliminate its nuclear knowledge or all its facilities. Intelligence suggests a secret enrichment site survived, and Iran's core scientific team remains intact. The strikes also hit Iran's missile systems, but failed to deliver a knockout blow. President Trump declared the program obliterated, but the reality is more complex. The operation reset the clock, but didn't solve the nuclear dilemma. A new, unpredictable chapter in US-Israeli-Iranian confrontation has begun. In the aftermath of the coordinated strikes, international inspectors and intelligence agencies scrambled to assess the true extent of the damage to Iran's nuclear infrastructure. What quickly became apparent was that, despite the destruction, Iran had managed to conceal a significant stockpile of enriched uranium from prying eyes. Experts estimated that Iran retained up to 900 pounds of uranium enriched to 60% purity, an amount alarmingly close to what's needed for a nuclear weapon if further refined. This revelation sent shockwaves through diplomatic circles, raising urgent questions about how much time the world truly had to prevent Iran from crossing the nuclear threshold. With this stockpile, Tehran now holds powerful leverage over the international community. Iranian negotiators can use their nuclear progress as a bargaining chip, extracting concessions or, if talks fail, inching ever closer to building a bomb. The world watches anxiously, aware that every move at the negotiating table could tip the balance between peace and conflict. While the strikes temporarily disrupted Iran's nuclear program, they did not eliminate the threat. The so-called breakout window, the time Iran would need to produce a bomb if it chose to, remains dangerously short, perhaps just weeks. The sense of urgency is palpable among world leaders and security experts alike. In response, Iran's leaders have adopted a posture of open defiance. On state television and in fiery speeches, they vow to rebuild what was lost, promising their people that Iran will not be cowed by foreign attacks or international pressure. The message is clear. Iran will not surrender its nuclear ambitions. President Masoud Pezeshkian, the public face of Iran's government, projects an image of calm resolve. He signals a willingness to engage in diplomacy, but firmly rejects any ultimatums or threats. His measured tone is meant to reassure both Iranians and the world, even as tensions escalate. Behind the scenes, Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei faces a stark and fateful decision. Should he risk further attacks and international isolation by pushing ahead with the nuclear program, or accept a deal that many in Iran would see as humiliating? The stakes could not be higher, and the world waits for his next move. For Iran's hardliners, the strikes have only reinforced a long-standing belief that only a nuclear deterrent can guarantee the nation's survival against its adversaries. This mindset may push them to double down, accelerating efforts to achieve nuclear capability, regardless of the risks. Ironically, the very action intended to prevent a nuclear-armed Iran may have made that outcome more likely. The region is now on edge, with military forces on high alert and the threat of further escalation looming over every diplomatic exchange. As the crisis deepens, the world faces a new and more dangerous phase, one where the margin for error is razor-thin and the consequences of miscalculation could be catastrophic. Iran's response was swift. It expelled all IAEA inspectors, ending international oversight. The world is now blind to Iran's nuclear activities. No more monitoring, only speculation. Tehran accuses the IAEA of bias, claiming it aided the strikes. This nuclear blackout raises the risk of miscalculation and preemptive action. The US and Israel now face a stark choice: trust Iran in the dark, or escalate militarily. The last guardrails of non-proliferation have been dismantled, pushing the crisis into uncharted territory. The US and Israel, once united in their approach to the Middle East, are now increasingly divided on what comes next. The alliance, long considered unbreakable, is being tested by new realities and shifting priorities on both sides. While both nations still share broad strategic goals, their leaders are now at odds over how to handle the growing crisis with Iran and the aftermath of recent military actions. President Trump, facing mounting political pressure at home, wants to use the recent strikes as leverage to force Iran back to the negotiating table. His administration is keen to avoid a new war in the region, especially with midterm elections looming. Trump's strategy is to project strength while signaling a willingness to de-escalate, hoping to secure a diplomatic win that he can tout to voters. He's even open to lifting some of the harshest sanctions if Iran agrees to strict new terms. But this approach has put him at odds not only with hawks in his own administration, who favor a tougher stance, but also with Israel, which sees any softening as a dangerous gamble. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, meanwhile, views the current moment as a fleeting opportunity to press Israel's military advantage. He's calling for nothing less than the total dismantlement of Iran's nuclear and missile programs, arguing that anything short of this would leave Israel vulnerable to future threats. Netanyahu is also leveraging the recent Gaza ceasefire, using it as a platform to push the US toward a much harder line on Iran. He believes that only maximum pressure will force Tehran to back down, and he's not shy about making his case directly to Washington. This growing rift between Washington and Tel Aviv is not lost on Iran. Sensing an opportunity, Iranian leaders are working to exploit the divisions, hoping to play the allies against each other and weaken the united front that once confronted them. As Trump and Netanyahu meet behind closed doors, the future of their alliance, and the direction of US policy in the Middle East, hangs in the balance. Both leaders know that their decisions in the coming days could have far-reaching consequences. The risk is clear. Conflicting agendas could undermine both diplomacy and deterrence, making it harder to contain Iran and increasing the chances of miscalculation or escalation in an already volatile region. The next steps taken by Washington and Tel Aviv will not only shape their own relationship, but will also help determine the future of the Middle East for years to come. The world is watching and the stakes could not be higher. The Iran crisis unfolds alongside a shaky Gaza ceasefire. Israel and Hamas remain deadlocked, with Israel demanding Hamas's disarmament and Hamas refusing. Netanyahu uses the ceasefire as leverage, tying Gaza's fate to U.S. support for his Iran strategy. Trump wants a lasting Gaza peace as a political win, but resists linking it to a broader anti-Iran campaign. The ceasefire's collapse could empower hardliners and trigger wider escalation, drawing in Iran's proxies. The Gaza truce is now a key piece in the U.S.-Israel-Iran standoff. A single misstep could unravel the fragile balance. The stakes are higher than ever. At the heart of the crisis, regime survival. Trump, Netanyahu, and Khamenei all face immense domestic pressures shaping their foreign policy. Trump seeks strength without war, hoping for a diplomatic win before elections. Netanyahu's political survival depends on a hard line against Iran, rallying his base and distracting from legal troubles. Khamenei faces economic crisis and unrest. The nuclear program is his regime's insurance policy. Each leader's choices are driven by political necessity as much as strategy. The suspension of IEA cooperation is a high-stakes gamble by Iran. The crisis is unpredictable because every move is about survival. The world watches as personal and national destinies intertwine. The world faces a stark choice: escalation or negotiation. Iran's nuclear blackout is a red line for the US and Israel, risking further strikes and retaliation. The cycle could spiral into regional war, drawing in more actors. Yet, a narrow path to diplomacy remains. Trump wants a deal, and Iran hints at openness if sanctions are lifted. Talks in Norway could offer a chance for de-escalation if both sides compromise. A deal might mean intrusive inspections for sanctions relief, but political risks are high for all leaders. The momentum favors conflict, but bold leadership could still change course. The next weeks will decide the region's fate. The Middle East is on edge after the US-Israeli strikes shattered the status quo. Iran's nuclear blackout and hardened resolve have deepened mistrust and risk. The US-Israel split adds complexity, while the Gaza ceasefire remains fragile. Existential fears drive all sides closer to the brink. The world watches, hoping for wisdom over war as the margin for error narrows. The clock is ticking, and the stakes are global.